all rise? The People's Tribunal is now in session.
Thank you, Your Honours. We invite Mr. Lee Wee Tuck to the stand.
Mr. Witak, do you confirm your testimony to the tribunal today shall be the truth?
Yes.
This is SD30 capital A. It comes in 2 volumes, so it's 30A and B. Mr. Lee,
These are from earlier. Oh, I see. Okay.
Mr. Lee, if you look at the first of the 2 volume of your statutory declaration and look at the page 8.
Oh. I have it. Can I just get it?
Yes, yes. No, you can. We give it to you.
Okay.
So in page 8.
Yes.
Now there's a signature there. Can you identify that signature?
That is my own signature.
Yes. So this is a statutory declaration that you have made.
Yes.
For the record, is Mr. Lee Wee Tuck. We have a sheet of paper that we have given in front which says, which introduces his qualifications. Is the document with you, Your Honours? Yes. So it is, his qualifications are just confirm that you are a professional accounting Chartered Association of Certified Accountant.
That is correct.
Since 1995.
Yes.
And you started, I'll go through this quickly because we want to get to the meat of the matter. You started an electoral roll analysis initiative as a concerned individual member of public since 2011.
Correct.
And later you were one of the researchers with this project called Malaysia Electoral Roll Analysis Project.
Correct.
Which, as I will in my submission note, has been given very high marks as being very robust and a good analysis. And this is a non-governmental organization founded by another person who is very well known with regard to electoral roll analysis, and that's Dr. Ong Kian Ming in 2012.
That's correct.
Yes. So you have been examining the electoral roll of Malaysia for almost how many years?
2 years.
And you contributed to this MERAP final report which you have appended to your document.
Yes.
And it was published in October of which year?
2012.
That is last year, so it's
Yes.
very current. There is also another document that we have, 2-sheet document. And just to, this report, have you updated this report?
This report was updated since the publication in 2012, October.
And it is updated to take account of
all the findings that we can have right up to the general election that was recently concluded.
Yes, so it's right up, it has been updated right up to the general elections, and this is the electoral roll which formed the basis upon which electors, voters, the electorate was determined,
Yes, that's correct.
which could participate in the elections.
Yes.
Yes. And basically, your analysis is as to the integrity of this electoral roll.
Rather the Merab team effort.
Yes, Merab team, when I mean
Yes,
you,
that's correct.
I mean the royal you, not just you, but you as part of the team. Huh?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, there is also two sheet which is called electoral roll issues. Is that also in your hands, Your Honor? Thank you very much. And now here, have you got a copy of that? We give him a copy. There's a copy that coming your way. Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I have it.
Yes. Electoral roll analysis, and this is something that you have prepared?
Yes.
Yes. And you have identified first 30 electoral roll issues.
Correct.
We went through each and every one of them. I think we'll be here for the remaining part of the year. So you have looked, there are some in bold, number 9, number 10, 25, 26, and 30. Why is it in bold? Can you edify us a little bit?
Because we consider these as the more material and more critical issues.
Thank you. So you'll be taking us through these, at least these 5
Yeah.
issues.
Yes. Yeah, we hope we have sufficient time for that.
Yes, never mind. We'll make time for that. So you're going to do a PowerPoint presentation of these issues, huh?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I introduce him to continue with the PowerPoint. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Good evening, distinguished members of panel. Let me start by giving a brief introduction of Merab. It was founded in February 2012 and is led by Dr. Ong Kian Meng, who is now the elected Member of Parliament for Sedang. And our work is actually, we cover about 31 issues, and it is a accumulation of work by the Merab team over 2 years. And we have selected some key issues to be included in the statutory declaration. Now, the 6 critical issues that we have identified consists of the Sabah Royal Commission of Inquiry findings, where we call them RCI voters. Voters issues, electoral issues related to addresses. Voters who are non-Malaysians essentially are from Indonesia, Philippines, Pakistan, and Bangladeshis. Voters with the same name and same date of birth, last minute and unusual additions to the electoral roll, and questionable movements of voters. And we also prepared an alternative scenario based on our analysis work, what might have happened in Sabah, Negeri Sembilan, and Perak if the issues that we have found in electoral does not happen, is not compromised. And lastly, perhaps it is an indication of the intent or the state of mind of EC when we talk about how they present the voters' information for public display. Okay, perhaps we'll start with the Sabah Royal Commission of Inquiry. Because at the moment there's a Sabah Royal Commission of Inquiry going on in Sabah to talk, because this is a very critical issue, the project IC that is a hot topic at the moment. Now in 2013, after numerous reports of Malaysian ICs being issued to undocumented immigrants, has been widely issued in Sabah. And they feel that, a lot of people feel that this issuance of IC has the intention to alter the demography landscape of the state of Sabah. So it is such a critical issue, and Merab has coined a special terminology called RCI voters, which refers to the voters who are found in the electoral roll with questionable ICs. Okay, this is an extract of a confession of a certain Mr. Ruslan, who is actually an assistant head of the Sabah and Sarawak IC department. And this was his disclosure in January 2013 during the Royal Commission of Inquiry. He spoke about blocks of IC, P1, P2, and P3, which were distinguished based on the time period when they were issued. And of the 3 blocks, I'll come to that later on how they split between 1, 2, and 3. The 16,699 ICs in P3 is entirely illegal. Whereas for ICs under block P1 and P2, they were considered dubious because the issue process did not follow through the usual application process. Although subsequently some of the P1 and P2 ICs were rectified, but it forms a very minor proportion of it. As you can see, in the Q&A session, he mentioned that 3,670 of the ICs were subsequently ratified, but 4,851 were rejected because they did not follow the normal IC issue procedure. Now, okay, let's come to some data. Now, P1 refers to the ICs issued between 1979 to 1984. And P2 refers to the second part of the 1980s. And P3 refers to the ICs issued in 1990. Now, as you can see on the right-hand side of the tabulation, about more than 50% of the P1 and the P2 ICs were found on the electoral roll as of Q1 2014. So there's a high percentage of dubious IC holders of this IC found themselves to be registered as gazetted voters. In fact, we also have 20 of the P3 voters who are entirely deemed illegal. And if you can see the distribution of these voters, they are more or less focused on the east coast of Sabah. And when we updated our statistics, we found that at the end of 2012, for the 60,000 dubious voters became only 49,000. And there's a subsequent interesting findings when we talk about the reduction in the number of voters. Okay, now this is a confession by the former director and assistant director of the National Registration Department. The 3 gentlemen here unanimously mentioned that the issuance of all these dubious IC they have the intention of increasing the Muslim voters in Sabah. Now, this is a disclosure that was made in the RCI. And as you know that in Malaysia, primary political currency is actually race and religion. So when you look at the 60,000 voters, a high proportion of them are actually Muslims. And if people who are familiar with the original racial composition of Sabah, the main race there is actually Dusun. And as you can see, out of the 60,000 overall voters, the Dusun Sabah are ranked number 11, which is a very 1% of the holders of the dubious IC. Whereas the rest are actually Bugis, Bajau, Melayu, who essentially are Muslims. So our findings actually collaborated with the disclosure at the RCI. And if you talk about the time when these voters were registered, these 60,000 voters were registered, you can see the years that we highlighted in light orange. Those years coincide at the time where Sabah was ruled by PBS, who was then in the opposition party. So there's a direct correlation with the registration of such voters against who was holding the state power in Sabah. And finally, if you notice that P1, the earliest P1 blocks of IC were issued in 1979. But when we look at the 60,000 voters, some of them were registered before 1979. So the date of registration of these voters, which is essentially a data entry, it borns out of data entry, suggests that there could be some backdated updating of the electoral roll. That is only a speculation. Okay, if you were to look at all these RCI voters in detail, about 70% of these voters have incomplete address. And these voters, when you look at the IC further, they have a lot of issues with their gender inconsistency, with their state codes, as well as their change of names. I shall go through all this in detail. Now you can see 70% of these voters have incomplete address. And if you look at the column, the fourth column, which is the house number, the house number is -N, which is not applicable. And the last five columns, it should contain the detailed address. Should be a street name, house number, and all that. Again, it is -N. And okay, this is an analysis of the inconsistency of the state code. Now, if you look at the column, the fourth column from the left, IC Lama, this is the OIC, Old Malaysian IC. So those IC that start with a prefix of H is meant for people who are born in Sabah. And if you look at the third column, that is the new IC number. And the 7th and the 8th digit of those new Malaysian IC would denote the state of your birth. So as you can see, there are some, okay, I'm sorry, this is actually the odd last digit, which is the male. I'm having some problem here because my image is not shown on my screen. Okay, this is the last digit of the Malaysian IC. If it is odd number, then it's supposed to be a male. And if it's even number, it should be a female. But you can see here is that we have found 44 names whereby there's a gender inconsistency with their IC. Okay, this is the state of birth that I'm talking about. As you can see, all these voters have a H prefix in their OIC. However, in their new IC, the 7th and the 8th digit, which denotes...
Mr. Lee, just a second, because you're using all this powerful word, gender inconsistency. What does that mean?
Okay. If we were to go back to the previous slide, in the new Malaysian IC, the last digit in the IC, if it is an even number, 2, 4, 6, 8, or 0, then the holder of that IC should be a female. And if it's an even odd number, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, then that holder of the Malaysian IC should be a male. So we found 44 cases whereby these ICs are actually issued to the wrong gender. So it could suggest an issue of manipulation. Okay. So let's talk about the inconsistent old state code. In the OIC, these people were depicted as being born in Sabah. So when you look at their new IC details, it is inconsistent with their OIC. In their new Malaysian IC, where we can determine their state of birth by the 7th and the 8th digit, we found that there are about 128 of them who are not Sabahans. And this is one of the image that we plucked from Facebook. This person do not look out of place in Karachi or Kandahar, and then according to his Malaysian new identity card, he's actually born in Sabah. So we looked at this IC and we actually found them to be in our 60,000 sample. Okay, if you look carefully at this tabulation here, the table on the left in yellow is actually the extract of the 2012 electoral roll, and on the right is actually the blue colored columns. They are actually the 2008 electoral roll. What Merab did was that we cross-referenced the two electoral roll which was used for the general elections, and we found that there are instances whereby the same OIC is being shared by people of two different names. As you can see, the OIC H520835, in 2012 it was Muhammad Noor bin Muslim, and he's voting in Kudat, and his years of birth of 1955. But in the election before the last one, that same OIC is now was held by actually by Jamaluddin bin Ibrahim, and that is his parliament constituency, Keningau. So we can spot a lot of such transfer of OIC numbers. And this is basically just a substantiation of what we find. The box on the top left, this is the 2008 electoral roll, which is in Microsoft Access format. And you can see the OIC is, it belonged to this Hashim bin Baral. But come 2012, when we go to the SPR EC website, where we key in the OIC details, and we found that that OIC has been removed from the original owner, Mr. Hashim bin Baral, and being used now by Mr. Anwar bin Ahmad Suki. So you can see there's a lot of interchange or transfer of the OIC. And this P1 and P2 problem does not only affect Sabah, because if you were to look at Selangor, about 570 of them turned up in YB Charles Santiago's constituency, and according to the one of our members who are actually helping out there, the first 3 voters that turned out to vote on that day itself were Sabah RCI voters. And before the general election, they engaged the Sabah community. In Klang, they actually have a Sabah community whereby they come to Klang to search for better livelihood opportunities. So they asked these Sabahans to look at the names and try to look for the addresses and try to see who are these people. Are they really Sabahans? So these Sabahans went over to those addresses and confirmed that they do not look anything like Sabahans. And this is just basically a tabulation of the entire country. There's about 7,000 P1 and P2 voters all over Malaysia. Now bearing in mind that this is the disclosure from only one NRD officer. So we are just only touching the tip of the iceberg, and then we can already see 7,000 of these P1, P2 voters has been registered all over Malaysia as voters. And just now I mentioned about there was some reduction between Q4 and Q1 2012. Now, between those 3 quarters, there were about 1,668 new P1, P2 voters. And then there were a reduction of 13,182. Interestingly, now,
Mr. Lee,
yes.
just go back to the tabulation of P1, P2.
P1, P2.
Okay.
Which one? The
No, just
original
not.
one? This one?
Just one before. One before that.
One before that.
Yeah. Just to confirm again,
Yes.
because you're going so fast, you're familiar. Many are not. Just to explain, this P1 and P2 are the dubious voters, and in what way are they dubious? As proved in the RCI
Yes, in
inquiry.
the RCI.
Yes. What way are they dubious? Slowly.
Okay, they are dubious because the issuance of these IC were not in accordance with the normal procedure. According to the officer testifying at the SRCI, Ruslihan, they were supposed to go. All these applications were to be subjected to a review by a special committee, and that was not being done. And if I recall correctly, his testimonial mentioned that he was instructed to issue the ICs without question.
Yes. So he was instructed to issue, and that's why they are dubious voters, huh?
Yes.
And they can't also prove their origin.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And they were issued in blocks, in batches.
Yes.
Yes. Proceed, please.
Thank you. Okay. Just earlier I mentioned about.
I wanted to know who do you think issued these documents?
It is issued by the National Registration Department.
They did, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So,
Yeah. Because
what-
they have, yeah.
so why didn't they take care of these obvious mistakes like the gender and
I think a lot of disclosure has been mentioned in the ongoing RCI. Anwar Ibrahim said that there was a special task force, and Mahathir said that he doesn't know anything about it. So I'm quite sure that National Registration Department officers would not act on their own accord. So it is still a mystery to this individual concerned.
And the issuance of this is under a federal department, under the federal government,
Yes.
although it's issued at the state level, yes.
But I was wondering if they were issuing it, you know, with the, through the body set up for this. I mean, why are these errors appearing, not consistency of gender with the numbers? And
Yes.
so on?
I think I can answer that.
Yes.
According to the former director and the assistant director of the National Registration Department, they say they wanted to increase the Muslim voters in Sabah. It was mentioned in one of my previous slides.
So just for confirmation, all these slides just now analyzing the discrepancies is a result of just a disclosure of Cik Ruslan bin Alias, yeah?
Yes.
Of the 60,000 numbers, right?
Yes,
And we're
that's-
dealing just with that numbers that has been was disclosed by him.
Yes.
And we will be making available, just to supplement this point,
Quickly.
just a pause in your, these are reports that have come up with regard to the ongoing Royal Commission of Inquiry. Because before the elections, the people in Sabah were very agitated over the fact that there was a large composition of illegal immigrants. The government was compelled because of pressure by the Sabahans themselves to set up an inquiry, and this inquiry is still ongoing. And if you would look at the first document,
They have completed, I think.
oh, they've just completed, is it?
That's the news I saw today.
Oh, I see, okay. So they have concluded, so we take on from where they left off, I suppose. Huh? And if I could just very quickly, because
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no,
thought
I think
this
it's
was
okay. I think
very-
it's quite useful to keep in line. So if you're honest, we'll just look at this document very briefly, Mr. Lee, if you will permit me.
Sure.
It said, I'll just highlight about 5 or 6 short sentences. It says, after hearing testimonies from 211 witnesses in just over a year, the Royal Commission inquiry was left with plenty to ponder as proceedings came to an end at the Kota Kinabalu High Court today. Oh, I see, so that's September 20th. A key point which clearly stood out was the fact that illegal immigrants in Sabah had been issued Malaysian identity cards indiscriminately. And then we missed that one line, go on to the next. Witnesses such as former Sabah Chief Minister, Dato Sri Yong Teck Lee, former Senator, Dr. Chong Eng Leong, former Internal Security Act detainee, Dato Dr. Jeffrey Kapari Kintengan, and former Sandakan District Chief Officer, Hasna Ibrahim, told the RCI how illegal immigrants were issued identity cards and registered on the electoral roll. This is a serious indictment because it comes from high official, Sabah Chief Minister himself. One of the RCI's main witnesses, Mutalib Muhammad Daud, the former Silam UMNO Division Executive Secretary, died 2 days before he was supposed to testify in June this year. Mutalib had written a number of books exposing accounts of ICs being issued to foreigners, which were codenamed Project IC or Project M, the M standing for Mahathir, the name of the country's former Prime Minister. In fairness to him, he testified and he said he didn't know anything about this project. And then the next paragraph, National Registration Department Director General Dato, now this is very important, Dato Charia Muhammad Said told the 5-man RCA panel that there were 113,000 problematic identity card holders in Sabah. So that's the person in charge of the issuing of this, and he himself says 113,000 problematic. So we skip the next paragraph, skip next, and come to where it starts with illegal immigrants. This is the last quote. Illegal immigrants who had been issued Malaysian identity cards told the panel how they received their documents in coffee shops and villages instead of collecting it from the NRD. And the rest, we'll come to it in due course. I don't want to interrupt him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I will proceed at a slower pace. Now, just now I mentioned that in Q1, the total number of dubious voters in the electoral roll was 60,000. And over the next 3 quarters, all the way to Q4 2012, which is supposed to be the GE13 electoral roll, there were 13,000 names being removed out of this P1, P2 list. Now, as a matter of, by the provision, as required by the regulations of registration of electors, when the EC removed the names of any voters from electoral roll, it must be subject to a public display. However, when we studied the electoral roll for those supplementary quarterly update, we found that almost 90% or more than 90% of these removals, deletions, were not found in the deletion transactions. This table shows that on the left hand side, it will show you the reasons for the removals. For example, death, kematian, which is the second item. The third item is masuk penjara, imprisonment, change of addresses, double records, records not active in JPN. This means death, or the National Registration Department cannot find any records, or silap pendataan, which is the error in data entry. So as you can see, those that have been disclosed to the public is about less than 10% of the removals. And interestingly, 67% of those additions during the 3 quarters were also not in the supplementary electoral roll, which is open for display at every quarter. So this suggests a sort of transaction updates in the background. Okay, that concludes the first part of the Sabah RCI issues. May I proceed to the second issue?
Sorry, just clarification. So that last reconciliation of movement, yeah. So not found is what? There.
Okay.
You didn't find it, or you didn't find the names, or
Yes, let me
they went
explain.
missing?
Every quarter,
Yeah, I know that.
yeah, we took all those P1, P2 names that have disappeared. The difference between the Q1 and Q4.
Okay,
So we have a list of 13,000 removals.
correct.
So we checked these names against the Q2 removals.
Yeah.
They were not there. And Q3, they were not there as well, so on and so forth.
And they could not be explained by kematian, masuk penjara, and all that.
No.
Okay.
Okay, the second issue that we can focus on is about addresses. Merab has done some work on analysis of addresses. Addresses could, the famous address case in Malaysia would be the Jalan, the 994 Jalan Papan, which Mr. Charles Santiago has mentioned. There are about 60 names in one houses. So we have done a bit more work on that addresses. Before that, I would like to play a video which actually explains it very well, and probably is a good departure from my monologue.
Previously, we have shown you cases of phantom voters and problems of the electoral roll in Klang. Now, we're bringing you to Seremban, but Mary Josephine had successfully removed 300 over phantom voters from her area. But first, let's have a look at the apartments that do not exist and the cemetery where phantom voters lived.
That's the only block existing with the open land, thick growth, and the graveyard. So, where did they get the address for block BCD? It's not even up. So where did the voters come from? Where do they live? They can't live on the tree or in the tomb. This place is called Taman Sri Amber with just one block of flats. But in this area, we have voters registered in Block B, Block C, which do not exist. There are 66 houses here. 66 houses in this block. And quite a number of the houses are vacant. The flats are vacant. We do not know the reason why B, C, and D is not up. But this is where B, C, D is supposed to be. Registered voters, surprisingly, not from these vacant lots, is from the building that don't exist. Okay, this is the other side of the graveyard. Literally speaking, these are the only hantu. So there's no proposed housing coming up here. Right, the trees over there, there are registered voters there. It's all trees and thick growth. There are no houses, no buildings. They don't even have squatters there. But this is the end of the Taman.
Sort of.
Sort of.
Sort of. It's quite a small area.
It is a small area.
Small area, but it's exclusive. Except they think that it's a cheap place. Last time it used to be an estate.
It used to be an estate, right? Right. Quite a number vacant, quite a number are vacant.
Yeah, because the developer don't have the money to develop it.
And this is the first house in the Taman. And this is, like I say, some of the houses are below this number, house number. This area also, there are phantom voters from here. It's not even developed yet. The whole road is abandoned, but we have registered voters that came in here are all change of address or tukar alamat. No new voters came in here. This is just like this too. It's also the tall trees. On the plan, it says it's here. This is just one block here. This is the back of the block, the road, and this is where you saw just now the addresses with the phantom votes. But this is where it is. There's no building.
You are watching.
So, thank you very much for the Durian FM TV team who produced that documentary. So, when we look at the addresses, there are a few categories like non-existing addresses where was eloquently explained in the video. We have vagabonds or questionable addresses. Now, this is actually what was being shown in the video just now. As you can see, Taman Sri Amber, you have B40, B37, B55, and B52, which are the house number in Taman Sri Amber, which it doesn't exist. And yet, if you look at the last penultimate column on the right, in Q4 2011, they were either Pendaftaran Baru, which is a new registered voter, or Pendaftaran Tukar Alamat, which is voters transferred or moved into these houses. So we can see among the number of what you call it, Sri Amber residents, only 2 of them were colored black, when then the phantom voters outnumbered the real voters. The black is genuine because it belongs to they actually registered in the real apartment. And then this is a press report in Chinese. 16 houses with 110 phantom voters. And I can explain this further. This is a constituency in Negeri Sembilan called Lobak. If you can see, in Q3 2011, there were 832 people who moved into this state constituency. And the number of people who moved in were much larger than those who are new voters, 575. So this is a highly unusual trend because as you can see from the other state constituency, the number of new voters are usually more than those who moved in. And if you were to further analyze in the respective details, you can see that in every house in that constituency, many voters whose names suggested they are not related are being planted into the same house. If you can see the first, the second one on second batch, which is colored in green, you can see one Indian with two Chinese being moved into number 15 Taman Banggawan. Or further down, you can see another two Chinese with another Indian being moved into 24. And in fact, they are just basically, this is a whole, there have been mass moving in voters into this small state constituency. And this is again, if you look at this trend, you can see that in this small place called Taman Zamrud, I have been there myself. It is a very small housing estate with a lot of abandoned houses. But as you can see, suddenly the houses from 118 until 137, there were a large number of multiracial voters being planted into the whole row. A real one Malaysia household, I think. Okay, what is amazing about this is that after Mary Josephine's initiative to raise objection, and they actually filed 300 objections and they were successful in every single one. Now in the Malaysian electoral regulations, there is a display period of 2 weeks whereby interested party can lodge an objection, and then they will call for a hearing, and those disputed voters would turn up, and there will be a hearing to see whether they're actually valid voters or not. Now 300 of those people being complained, none of them turned up. So all the 300 voters were removed in the electoral roll. That was for the update in Q4 2011. However, if you can see from my tabulation here, exactly 1 year later in Q4 2012, if you look at the last two columns, these same individuals were being reinstated into the same address where they were evicted. So that is a very determined schemer, I would say. And we come to a point of questionable addresses. Sometimes when you register a new voter, the address is based on the identity card addresses. However, we found in the electoral roll great many people with very funny addresses. For example, Mr. Ju Wat, W-H-A-T, Wat, his address is Pekan, town. So, town. If I'm a father and my daughter is dating a guy who's staying in town, I'm not very comfortable. And the second individual, his address is a secondary school. And the third individual is also a secondary school, but it's a technical secondary school. And we also have another individual, Mr. Muhammad Zulkifli. His address is just a Royal Custom Office tower. And you can also look at these next two individuals. One is staying in the Pejabat Pertanian, Station Pertanian, which is essentially an agriculture office. And then another person, he's staying in a Tadika Ria, is a kindergarten. And then interestingly, in Sabah, their address is called Airport Area. And this is a bit interesting. When we look into the details, the vast majority of the airport dwellers are in Libaran. And if you look at the, right in the center there, Bangsa, which denotes the nationality or race, they are all Filipinos. So probably it's easier to fly in and fly out. And as you can see, a lot of those addresses, alamat, which is the where you're supposed to be, should contain the street number and the house number, is all blank, as if you're just planting people without giving details. I'm quite, it will be quite interesting to look at the exact identity card details. And also, dubious addresses not only happen in Negeri Sembilan or Sabah. In this case, we found a dozen voters whose address is actually in a sawmill factory. And by their names, they are all Chinese, but their surnames are all different, which suggests that they are not from the same family. You can see Chin, Ching, Li, and we also have about 70-year-old factory workers registered as a voter in the factory. And just now, our Dr. To was talking about this Kemas, all right? And we noticed that there were about 12 voters. There were 6 voters in the cracker factory, all right? This address is actually in number 27, Kampung Sri Jaya, Jalan Gopeng. And when we noticed that these 6 voters are all situated in the same address. So when we Googled the address, we found out that this is actually a cracker factory under Kemas, which just now Dr. To explained in detail. This Kemas, which is under the Ministry of Rural and Regional Development. So it is actually an effective tool whereby somehow they get to the rural voters. And you can see that the factory that is set up under Kemas, they can host a number of voters there as well. Okay, this needs some explaining. Now, KN71, this refers to the 7th and 8th digit in our Malaysian IC. So this would denote the state of birth. And in the case of 71, it is the individual is either born overseas or the place of birth is unknown. Now that alone is not sufficient to say that this is a phantom voter, because for example, the wife of Anwar Ibrahim actually have a 79 IC. However, when we study all this KN71, we found a very interesting trend. For example, in Wangsa Maju, this is a constituency in Kuala Lumpur, and when we notice this Kampung Sungai Mulia, now this is quite a well-developed kampung. I've been there myself. The houses are properly numbered, the road signs are properly put up, so you know street number 1, street number 2, and street number 3. But we notice a huge number of, high number of voters. They hold the Code Negara 71 IC, i.e. the place of birth unknown, and they are all living in Kampung Sungai Mulia. However, their address appears to be incomplete as compared to the others who are staying in the same kampung and does not hold a KN71 IC number. So this is, basically what it says is that these people, the place of birth unknown, and they are staying in this kampung whose house number we do not know. So this suggests a planting of a lot of voters. And this similar trend is repeated in Negeri Sembilan. This is a place called Kampung Ismail. And what is interesting about all these KN71 with no house number, they are all registered after the 12th general election, where Ampangan was won by the opposition for probably the first time. And you can see the influx of these questionable voters. And in the last GE, Ampangan was lost by PKR by merely 89 votes. Of course, now it's quite common to find many voters registered in one address. So if you look at this number 12, Jalan 4A, 27A, which is also in Wangsa Maju, there are 9 Code Negeri 71 voters in one address. And I went to this location myself. I was driving through the residential area. I couldn't find anything. And then I finally realized that that address is actually a restaurant. So this is exactly the 12 Jalan 4A, Suk 27A. And when I spoke to the chief waiter there, I actually showed them this list. And then the chief waiter said he doesn't recognize any of the name bar 1. And also similarly, a lot of other cases in Wangsa Maju, whereas this particular household, they have a household whereby there are Malays and Chinese together, 9 of them in total, and the surname of the Chinese do not suggest that they are in any way related. This is in the house number 37, Lorong Maksuri 1, Wangsa Maju. And we can also find about 12 voters living in this lot 486-51 Gombak. So and then in Negeri Sembilan, Bukit Mutiara, we can see that in this particular house, number 66, Taman Bukit Mutiara, you can see that in Q3 2011, there is an Indian had been moved into this house. And in Q4, a Malay moved into this house. And in Q4, the following year, a Chinese moved into this house. So in the timing of, although there's only 3 voters, but you look at the time, it's very interesting.
What, Malaysia?
Yes. And one of the interesting one is also in Jalan number 12, Jalan 3, Manikawa Sagam, which has 21 voters of various races. So this is getting a bit monotonous, but it just shows that high incidence of such cases all over Malaysia. And yeah, so that is in terms of individual houses and individual addresses. But when you look at the big picture, out of the 13 million voters, we found that a good 30% of them, sorry, there is a chart called address completeness analysis. There's a few pages further down, after all this individual print screen of the EC address. After this 6/6, number 12, Jalan Tan Sri Manikawa Sagam.
Okay, sorry. Oh, here. It's in there. It's in here.
Mine they fix it there. Mine they fix it.
Yeah,
Manikawa Sagam, yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. But I can't find it. I don't have it. Okay.
May I continue?
Yes. Okay. I didn't have that.
May I continue?
All right.
Thank you. So in terms of the analysis of the Okay, I can continue. Okay, our team has done an address completeness analysis. This is the big picture, whereby out of the 13 million voters in Malaysia for GE13, we found that almost 30% of these voters, they have very suspicious or very incomplete address information in the electoral roll. About 2.3 million of them their address information is blank, whereas another 11.7%, while they have a house number in the electoral roll, but the street name is completely missing. So that constitutes about 30% of the voters, whereby their address aroused suspicion. And most places are actually found in Sabah and Sarawak, which according to the Prime Minister in power, these are the fixed deposits of the Barisan Nasional in terms of the voters' bank. And why address is so important is that under Article 113 of the Federal Constitution, a voter is entitled to vote in that constituency, provided he's resident in that address in that constituency at one point of time. Without address information, there is no way to substantiate that whether he's a valid voter or qualifying voter for that constituency. And if you look at the highest number of voters without address or blank address, it is in the Parliament constituency of Ingan, whereby 56.88% of the voters have blank as the address information.
What is this place Ingan like?
It is in Sarawak.
Yeah.
I have not been there myself, but I would suspect it should be somewhere more interior, whereby transportation could be a huge issue. Okay, while it can be argued that rural areas in Sarawak there could be a case for incomplete address information. However, we found that urban places such as Sandakan, which is the state capital of Sabah, and Kota Kinabalu, which is the state capital of Sabah, as well as Sandakan, a very developed area, 42.44% and 37.55% respectively. The voters there are also without address of any kind. So also other rural areas or other urban areas or semi-urban areas such as Pontian in Johor, Langkawi, which is a tourist area, Labuan, which is the International Finance Center. There are a high percentage of voters without address information, as well as Muri, Kota Baru, which is the state capital of Kelantan, Setampin, and Sibu. So this is a print screen from the EC website, some of the samples that we can show the tribunal. Now, you can see this lady, Norasma binti Hasbullah, the address is dash, so forth, so on and so forth. So these are actually, now what is amazing about this place, this is in Lembah Pantai, and the address is still dash. So this Hamid bin Daud is born in 1962, so his identity card will be issued in 1974 when he is 12 years old. And by then in the 1970s, surely there could be a case that in Lembah Pantai there will be house number and street numbers. And also this is another example in Langkawi, which is a tourism area where we also have the annual weapons display or exhibition. Yeah, defense. And then interestingly, even in a very urban area like Petaling Jaya, we have people who has no address information, and voting locality is near Wisma Selangor. Wisma Selangor, it means Selangor Tower. So if you have a tower nearby, surely you have a street name and a house address. And these are merely just address with a number, a house number without street number. So it is very confusing, because if you are a candidate for the area, if you look for this individual, you just only know the house number without knowing the street number. It's impossible for you to locate that person. Basically, this is just a tabulation of the 22 Parliament constituency with the blank address, but I shall not go into detail for this. With that, I conclude the section on address analysis. If there's no question at this point of time, I shall proceed with
Sorry,
this.
can I just ask, so D2.6, this address completeness,
Yes.
on 13,200,000, that is the total number, sorry, that's the total number of voters on the electoral register?
Yes. We have 13 million registered voters.
Registered voters.
Yes.
And 30% of that are questionable.
From the address
From
point of
this-
view, yes.
From this address point.
So the next issue that we wish to bring up is the case of unusual additions of voters prior to GE13. I think in the Permanta report, it was mentioned that some people turned up at the polling station and found that their name has disappeared. And we have, interestingly, we have compared the Q4 2012 electoral roll with the electoral roll that was actually used in the 13th general election. Now, according to a government gazette published on the 11th of April, they confirmed that the electoral roll for the GE purposes is supposed to be for Q4 2012, which means that for Q1 2013, the transaction shouldn't be in the electoral roll. And that Q4 2012 electoral roll was gazetted on 22nd of February. However, when we took the electoral roll, Q4 2012, and compared to the actual electoral roll that was issued by the EC, we saw some discrepancy. And according to the Q4 2012 electoral roll, where that should be the right number, it was 13,291,386 voters. Whereas what appeared in the GE was 13,271,2 voters. And among the number difference, we found that 25,000 names were deleted and another 2,000 names being added. Now this is actually going against what was gazetted, because the Gazette mentioned that there should be 13,291,286 voters, but somehow another 2,000 were added and another 25,000 were being removed. Now this was not subject to any public display, and then it was not apparently consistent with the government gazette on 11th of April. Now when we look further into the 2000 sudden addition, we found that 74% of these 1999 voters were actually Sabah RCI voters. And out of these 1999 voters, 84% of them, they were also voters in 2008. Thereafter, they disappeared from the electoral roll and re-emerged just before the 13th GE. And for those 1682 voters who emerged suddenly, 1475 of them are actually Sabah RCI voters. So this is a bit odd. You have a group of voters that appear suddenly and disappear after that. And a high percentage of them are actually holding questionable identity cards. And if you look at the distribution, although it's not significant, but it still would suggest that they're all in Sabah, especially Silam, Kalam, Balakan, and Putatan. And we just analyzed into a couple of the constituencies so that the picture becomes more apparent. When we did for Sandakan a comparison of the electoral roll for Q4 2012 against what was actually issued in GE13. This is what we did. We compared the two electoral rolls. The one that was gazetted on February, and the other one that was supposedly gazetted again in April. And this new date of gazette was not mentioned in the government gazette at all. So we found that 68 names were removed from the Q4 electoral roll and 61 being added in. And out of these 61 voters that was added in, 93% of them are actually Sabah RCI voters. And these are the details of the 61 voters that emerged suddenly. And when we look into the EC website to get further details of these voters, we found that again their address is dash. And these voters, when we look at the 2008 electoral roll, which is in database access format, they appear in the 2008 electoral roll. So these are just the information of those 68 voters that were taken out just before the GE. And confirmation of the RCI, SPR website. Now, this is exactly the same thing happened in Tawau. Now, Tawau, there was a election petition, and it was filed by the losing candidate to challenge the result of the election based on the fact that the electoral roll was not the right one. It was against the gazetted one. And then, unfortunately, his election petition was rejected by the court, and he was asked to pay 60,000 ringgit. And the court refused to look into his basis of challenge is that he's not disputing on the electoral roll, but that electoral use was actually did not go through the due process. It was not gazetted as per Section 9A. Unfortunately, the court would not see to that and just rejected his election petition. And again, just to reaffirm our point, the similar thing happened to Kota Belud and also in Negeri Sembilan. And if you look at the Negeri Sembilan number of voters, those who were added on those who were suddenly added on numbered 5 of them. And what is interesting is that one of the voters who suddenly re-emerged is voting in another parliament constituency despite staying in the same address. And that is the first name on the yellow box, Parati Anak Perempuan Bala Krishnan. You can see the number locality is in Taman Sri Mawa Mantin, so she is voting in Seremban. And if you look at the blue boxes down there, the first name, the same individual Parati, she's still in the same locality, and then her parliament has changed from Rasa in 2008 to 2013 to Seremban. So there's actually a change of state parliament constituency without the change of address. That concludes our sudden additions. And perhaps the last issue that we want to bring up at this point of time is the issue of redelineation without parliamentary approval. Because in Malaysia, whenever you have a redelineation exercise, a change of constituency boundaries, it has to be approved by the parliament. However, we found some instances where voters have been moved around without parliamentary approval. And one of the key cases is in Pasir Panjang. This is a state constituency in Perak.
This document we do not have before you. We undertake to supply it. So if we could briefly go through the essential points.
Okay, sure. All right.
But it is in the SD.
Okay. According to the
Just a second. If you look at the SD, the yellow at the right-hand bottom shows the page in the SD.
yeah, okay, there are instances where oh, okay, sorry. Okay, thank you. All right, a bit of background to this. When movement of voters from one constituency to the other requires a parliamentary approval. However, there are some instances where such movement were detected, and the formal answer that people would get is their EC is using the Elections Act 1958, Section 7.2 and 7.4 as a reason for voters being moved out of a particular constituency. However, if we were to examine the specific paragraphs of the legislation, Section 7.2 only empower the EC to divide a constituency into polling district, whereas 7.4 talk about establishing a new polling station. So there's nothing in that two section to talk about moving voters from one constituency to the other, or in this case, splitting a bed where husband and wife is sleeping. So in the case of Pasir Panjang, between 2008 and 2013, there were two localities from Pasir Panjang. They were moved from that state constituency to Setiawan. Now this Pasir Panjang constituency was held by the Pakatan Rakyat former Menteri Besar, which is Nizar Jamaluddin. Pakatan Rakyat initially won the state election in 2008, but due to some subsequent event, it sort of turned from a Pakatan Hell State to the Barisan Nasional Hell State. That was a story of its own. But this state constituency belongs to the then Menteri Besar. Now, the two localities that were moved from Pasir Panjang to Setiawan are Velkra Gugusan Lekir and Rancangan Taman Belia Lekir. Now, these two areas, they were known to be staunch Nizar Jamaluddin Pakatan Rakyat supporters. A total of 458 voters were moved out of this state constituency, although they did not change their house address. They didn't move out. And in fact, those that were moved out were in stream 4, 5, and 6. Now what is stream? Stream is how the EC segregate the voters according to their age. So 1 would be the older voters, 6 would be the younger ones. And you can see from these two localities, the younger ones who are staunch Pakatan Raya supporters were moved out, whereas the older one remains. So this is a map that my colleague has on these two locations. Now if you look at the red dot, that is where Felkra Lekil is. And in the 2008 general election, as you can see the line that looks something like a camel, place that address under Pasir Panjang, all right? So somehow in 2013, that little dot suddenly belongs to the state constituency of Setiawan. So the line has been redrawn across age group in that particular locality. And this is actually this is a parliament question posted by the member of parliament in Perak in a place called Beruas. So Dr. Ngikuhan asked this parliament question to the Prime Minister of Malaysia, why these two areas were moved away. So the Prime Minister's answer was, according to the sub-regulation 25 sub-3, elections, electoral registration of electors, the SPR is empowered to change the voting address of any person which was found erroneous at the point of registration. However, when we look into regulation 25 sub-3, that section talk about correcting individual errors, and there's nothing to do with moving a huge number of people from one location to the other. And this is a snapshot of those younger voters who are being moved out from Pasir Panjang state constituency. As you can see, the third last column in 2008, they were supposed to vote in state constituency of Pasir Panjang, and in 2013, with the same address, same house number, they were moved to Setiawan. So this would collaborate with the testimonial of YB Charles Santiago. In similar thing happened in Port Klang. On day one, I believe he spoke about 3,000 people being moved out of his state constituency. When we examined the reply from the EC on the reason as to why these people were moved out of his constituency, we noticed that 360 voters, point two, were moved out of his constituency in Q1 2001 because of correction of locality boundary. Again, you need state assembly or parliamentary approval for this sort of things. The EC cannot move a person out of state constituency without being tabled and approved in parliament. And these are the appendixes in the EC's reply, and we can see that at various point of time, there are 3 voters, 177 voters and 180 voters being moved out of Klang and being moved into Kappa, for example. So this seems to be, they are doing this moving of voters by batches. And also in the state of Negeri Sembilan, when we look at the entire 208 electoral roll and the 2013 electoral roll of this Negeri Sembilan, we managed to locate 18 individuals across the entire state, whereby despite staying in the same houses, they were moved to different state assembly seats. For example, there are 6 people in this place called Jalan Ulu Temiang. Now they have been staying in the same houses. Now the top part of the slide shows that these are the 2008 electoral roll details. You can see that these 6 individuals are staying in Jalan Temiang, and their state assembly seat is actually in Lobak, which is circled in red. Now if you look at the SPR print screen, at the bottom, in 2012, despite staying in the same house 357-B, their state constituency has changed from Lobak to Temyang. We can see that this trend has been repeated across the state, whether it's another state constituency called Mambao, Semarak, where again the address remains the same, but the state constituency has moved from Nilai to Lengeng, or Jempol to Bahau. So in the Pemantau report, they mentioned that they received complaints whereby individuals turned up in a polling station and found that their name is no longer there. Perhaps that they went to the place that they previously voted and they couldn't find their names there. Somehow they have to go to another part of the state to vote. In this case, for example, to Jeram Padang to Bahau. So these isolated pockets of changes that we can detect suggest that somehow it's unexplainable. Why a person doesn't move his house at all? He wouldn't have updated his electoral details, and yet somehow his state assembly details has been changed by the EC. Okay, that concludes my presentation for now.
I don't know whether, Mr. Lee, you can, you had a very interesting presentation also on alternate scenario with regard to 3 states. You looked at 3 states and said, okay, if the electoral roll is not compromised, what would the outcome have been? Do you think you can make a short presentation on that?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Again, I think the slides will be provided later, but we'll go through this because I think it's keeping... yeah. Because that was later we asked him to do to see.
Could you just bear a
Now
moment
this,
with me?
this is very interesting because this is what if the electoral roll was clean and nice and proper? Then what would the outcome have been? Thank you.
Okay, we had in an alternate universe where everything is clean and fair. In Sabah, let's just hypothetically speaking, there were no P1 and P2 voters, limited to the number disclosed by Mr. Ruslihan, which I believe is just only the tip of the iceberg. 2 parliament seats would have changed hands from Barisan Nasional to Pakatan Rakyat because the number of P1 and P2 voters exceeded the winning majority of the Barisan Nasional candidates. And other constituency could have been a closer fight. And without considering other dubious IC not disclosed because the other officers did not testify. Okay, in Negeri Sembilan, Barisan Nasional won 22 state assembly seats against Pakatan Rakyat's 14 state assembly seats. Now it could be quite different because when we look at the 5 state seats which was won by a majority of 89 for Ampangan, 1,511 for Johor, another 1,000 for Klawang, Labu, and Pilah. Now, the first 4 rows, we just look at the number of Pakistanis, Indonesians, Filipinos, and Bangladeshis, as well as one-name wonders. One-name wonders are those voters in the electoral roll, where according to their race is Malay, but as you know, in Indonesia, it's quite common to have a single name for a Malay. But in Malaysia, you have to have a bin or a binti to show the name of the individual as well as the parent. And bin and binti would actually denotes the gender. So we notice that there are some numbers of these one-name wonders which suggest that they could be Indonesians. And we just, hypothetically speaking, age 90 and above, there are a lot of people who are 100 years old and above, as well as Sabah RCI voters. Now, if you consider all these dubious voters, as well as the fifth category, voters with incomplete addresses, and they were registered after the 12 GE. And I've analyzed for 5 state constituency, the individual kampongs, where these people came in, registered in the 21st century, but do not have a proper address. So if it is very old voters, yes, probably that they just have a kampong because they are just new settlers. But in the 21st century, I will expect you to have a house number because it's rather more modern era now. And if you don't have a house number or street number, well, how do you pay your quit rent and assessment? There will be a loss of revenue to any responsible administration. Now, if you were to look, you will add up all these dubious voters together. You can see at the bottom of the tabulation, the BN majority for Ampangan would have turned from a winning 89 to a losing 176. Similarly, for Labu and Pila, the result would have been in reverse. So 3 out of the 5 states would have turned into Pakatan Rakyat's favor. And this is merely scraping the tip of the iceberg, because we know that there are about 30% or 3 over million of the voters without complete address all over Malaysia. If you were to consider that, you can see in Ampangan, there are 8,300, right at the bottom there, 8,310 voters who have incomplete address or no address at all. Similarly, for other constituency, these voters with incomplete information, unverifiable information, runs into thousands, 5,000 and above. And if you look at a majority, winning majority is about 500 and 300. So it could have easily turned in favor of Pakatan Rakyat. And had these 5 seats result have turned in favor of Pakatan Rakyat, then the math is that BN will have 17 seats compared to Pakatan Rakyat of 19, which means that Negeri Sembilan could have fallen out of BN hands for the first time. And in Perak, what could it have been? In the 13G, which just concluded, BN won 31 seats compared to 28 in a very hot and closely contested race. In fact, Pakatan Rakyat actually have more of the popular votes in Perak. Now, we look at the 4 seats. Manjoy, Lubuk Merbau, Pasir Panjang, and Manong. First, you can see Pasir Panjang, the winning majority for Barisan Nasional was 204. And just now, we saw the Belah Bahagi issue where 458 voters were moved out of Pasir Panjang. So that itself could have turned Pasir Panjang on its own. And if you look at the movement of voters, there is a significant increase of voters across all these 4 states constituency. 32% for Manjoy, 27% for Lubuk Merbau, 42% for Pasir Panjang and Manong. Now, if you look at in terms of the new additions for incomplete address, in Lubuk Merbau itself, 626 new voters were registered with incomplete addresses. That could have easily turned the winning majority of 58. Similarly, even without the Belah Bahagi, the transfer of voters, 771 against 307, 841 against 231, and probably 342 majority of, would have offset this 132 winning majority. So this is a definition of the various classification of addresses. So incomplete address refer to voters with a house number with no street addresses. That itself is highly dubious. Had these 4 state seats turned in Pakatan's favor, Barisan Nasional would have lost the state. And this is just a print screen of the some of the dubious voters found in Manjoy. As you can see, this is a un-Malaysian Malay name, where Janiza or Normala. But normally we expect a bin or a binti. Okay, that is for the alternate scenario.
So, sorry, if I may ask, the 4 seats then that we just looked at, Perak,
Yes.
what were they before GE13?
Before GE13, Pasir Panjang was held by Pakatan Rakyat, and I can't remember the other two. Probably most of them are held by Pakatan Rakyat.
Okay. Total number of seats is this one. 4 seats because they were the closest, and when the unusual number of votes added and so on, the result would have then would be BN 27 and PR would have 32. And or if just 2 seats, then PR would still win by 30. So these 4 seats were crucial to the outcome of the 2-1 majority. So that's officially the moment, and the official result was nationally.
You have a slide with voters with same name and same date of birth.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So he's also got voters with same name and same date of birth. So, but I think, do you have many of those?
Yes.
Can you show it very quickly?
Okay.
I think. Yeah, okay.
Use is overwhelming, no?
Yes.
My only question I want to ask is, when it was presented to the election commission, what did they say about it?
These later slides were not presented.
Not
No, the
presented.
earlier ones.
The earlier one that when you, the last one, 2012, is it?
Okay, in October 2012, we issued the Merak report.
Yeah.
So initially, EC refused to see Dr. Ong Kiat Ming because he said, since you now have joined DAP, we cannot see you.
Okay.
So then Dr. Ong went to the parliament and read out the report.
Okay.
Only then the EC organized a meeting. And on the 5th of November, I had the pleasure to accompany Dr. Ong to meet the EC officials. So in that meeting on the 5th of November, they solely talked about the 10 points that we raised in the postal voter areas, which is not my part of the presentation now. They assured us that certain steps are being taken care of to cure the ills that we found with regards to the postal voters. So that was the gist of the meeting on 5th of November.
But this was a more serious problem, isn't it?
I would agree, because postal voter constitute about 180,000 names,
Yeah, but
and
still,
up to
still
300,000.
important, I would say. But this, because if you say 30% have no addresses or are dubious or needs to be verified, that's quite a lot, isn't it?
We are happy to see them if you want to meet up with us.
Yes. So in other words, but they are very critical. That 30% is very critical. That's the point is being made.
Yeah, that's right, significant number.
And just to put this this Merak report, this is the report that was presented for dialogue purposes, and then the EC refused to deal with it because they said one of the persons involved had joined a political party after that. But just to highlight the fact, we'll probably be stating in our submissions as well, that the ideas, which was an organization which was officially credited by the Election Commission to observe the elections, in their report, I'll present it subsequently, in their report, they said this, of this Merak report, they said, We examined comments made by various quarters, but found that a study by the Malaysian Electoral Analysis Project MERAP to be the most comprehensive. While we observed that MERAP may be viewed as partisan due to its leader joining PR, our analysis found its report to be robust. So this is an official credited NGO that is accepted by the Election Commission itself, coming up with a report that this is, its credibility is beyond question. In fact, they say it's robust and comprehensive. I thought that's worth noting. It's fact worth noting.
We, having heard this, I mean, and evidence adduced and the register examined and so on, I can't imagine ideas coming up with any ideas about the report.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
And just also to highlight the fact that as we noted in the sheet, there are 30 electoral roll issues, and we have only touched on the most critical 3 or 4 of those. So this report, in fact, a very substantive report which talks about much more that created that really suggests that the electoral roll, which is the foundation of who can vote and who cannot vote and who determine ultimately the government of the day, that electoral roll, just examining 5 of the 30 issues, is found to be sadly very lacking and flawed. So with that, I think we conclude, unless there are questions, sorry.
Where there have been some problems.
Yes, I think we can, Mr. Lee, you can present, like with regard to all of the 30,
Yes.
you can just do a summary in writing so that when the panel has to consider, at least they will have a comprehensive range. Oh, you have that, huh?
30 points.
30 issues.
30 issues, but with regard, under each issue, just the kind of the problem. Like some self-evident, some electoral roll is marrying oneself. So you have husband and wife with the same name and same gender, I think, is it?
No, he's actually a postal voter, an army person. His wife is himself. So he registered himself with his army IC, and subsequently he's entitled to register his spouse as a postal voter. Now this is a 208 issue, and when we look at the IC number of the spouse, is actually the army service personnel's ordinary IC. So according to electoral roll, Mr. A is marrying Mr. A. So we have 2 records. Mr. A would vote once with his army IC, and Mr. A, the spouse, will be voting with his civilian IC.
But it's the same person
It's the same person, but listed as a spouse
of himself.
yes.
I see. So maybe I think what we can do is just like one-liners under this 30 electoral roll issues, so that at least you have before you kind of some kind of indication.
And I think also that final 70%, 30%, you know, that slide, because that sums up, you know, all the, as I understand it, the discrepancies, the anomalies and all that,
Yes.
and then reduce it to numbers, you know, 13 million total voters, 30% of that questionable. I think that was a telling,
The tip of the iceberg.
of
Yeah.
course it's still the tip of the iceberg, you know,
There's no snow in Malaysia.
but still a telling number.
Make it more amazing.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
this is out of curiosity.
Yes.
Maybe it's not an issue in Malaysia, but you're already talking about the degree of accuracy, which is, you know, it's very clearly from your presentation, but also updating, you know, a lot of dead people still in the electoral roll. But how about the number of unregistered eligible voters? They, you know, they already have right to vote, but maybe not registered in electoral roll?
I wouldn't have that statistics, but 25 million Malaysian population is about 28 million. So probably you're looking at least half of them or 60% of them who are eligible to vote. Then probably it could be 15 million probably. And I think there's a statistics a few years back, if I can remember it correctly, EC was saying there's about a couple of million or 4 million who are eligible to vote, but they have not registered yet. Something like, some statistic like that. It runs into millions, if I recall.
So the Malaysian citizens already in electoral roll is reach about 95% or less than that?
Honestly, I can't make a speculated guess.
Since Malaysia is 21 years
21.
old, not
Yeah.
in my country, 17 years old. Here,
Oh.
27. So it's okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Yes, if there are no questions, then Mr. Lee, you have made a formal and solemn undertaking on oath to work a little more
Okay.
and prepare in respect of the 30 issues, and then maybe you can start off with the slide that His Honor suggested would be extremely useful to sum up the whole tabulation.
Okay.
Mr. Lee, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you, distinguished member of panelists.
Thank you very much.
Where is she? I don't see her. We have, we just want to see whether the witness is here. She's here, she's here. Better call our team back, they've gone. Can we go on?
What? How many more witnesses?
She's here. Just one or two, but the time is, but if we can have one, at least one witness, a very brief witness, who's an elected member of representative, member of parliament from Kuantan, and she's come specially for this. Amidst a busy schedule.
All right.
Yes, YB. Yes. There is no statutory declaration because we summoned her at quite a late hour.
Miss, can you please state your name and your IC number, your identity card number to the members of the panel?
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum and a very good evening. My name is Fuzia binti Saleh.
Okay, just a second. Yeah, sorry.
F-U-Z-I-A-H binti Saleh, S-A-L-L-E-H. My IC number is 590713016022.
Miss
Fuzia.
Miss Fuzia, do you confirm that your testimony to the tribunal today shall be the truth?
Yes, the truth. Nothing but the truth. Inshallah.
Yes, and the whole truth. Yes. Puan Fuzia, you can sit down, I think. Now, I want to ask you about one very critical area because in the last few days, we have established that there were at least 30 seats where the votes were marginal and were influenced by advance and postal voting, particularly advance voting, 30 seats. And 30 seats would have, if they had changed, you won't probably be sitting here today, you'll probably be in government, huh? But, so we just want you to give us some information with regard to advance voting.
Okay. with regards to advance voting, prior to the elections, the Election Commission said that it is possible to guard the ballot boxes 24 hours round the clock until the votes are counted. I mean, those were the statements made by the chairperson of the EC, as well as, I mean, it was repeated many times, and I think it is public knowledge. What happened during General Election 13, advance voting took place 5 days before actual polling day. And the ballot boxes were kept in police cells in the IPD. Yeah.
In all cases?
Sorry?
In all cases?
In all cases that I know. In all cases that I know, the ballot boxes were kept in the cells, in the police cells. Together along in the police cells are the ballot papers for the actual polling day, as well as the indelible ink. So on the, I think it was the 30th of April,
Yes.
on the day of the advance voting, when our polling agents insisted on following the ballot boxes to the cells, they were stopped by the police personnel.
Sorry, on advanced polling day, is it?
On the day of the advance polling, which is the 30th of April.
And after the voting?
Yeah, after the voting at 5 p.m., when my polling agent insisted on following the ballot boxes to the cells, they were stopped. They were not allowed to enter the cells. Contrary to what EC have actually agreed, we argued, but the police say, in fact, in my case, the OCPD say that the cells are restricted areas and cannot be entered by anybody without the permission of the police. They insisted that the ballot boxes are safe inside the cell. I received a tip-off that my opponent is going to exchange the ballot boxes. And the information I received is that one day prior to polling, the cells will be open, and EC will open the cell to take out the ballot papers as well as the indelible ink. Of course, the ballot boxes of the advance voting will be vulnerable then. So on the day, one day before polling, which is the 4th of May, the time that I knew that EC is going to open it is about 8. And I was there at 7. I was there at 7 a.m. I was there at the police station. I waited for EC to arrive, and the car arrived, and I insisted on escorting the EC officers into the cell. Because the tip-off that I received is that they're going to exchange the ballot boxes, they're going to duplicate exactly the ballot papers with the serial numbers, because all the serial numbers were there, exact serial numbers. That was the tip-off that I received. So I insisted on escorting. I mean, if they did not allow my polling agent, I'm the candidate. Surely I have every right to escort the EC officers. The police officer that was on duty did not allow me to go in, and I said, then EC is not going in without me. I have every right, and I stopped EC officers from going in. So they had to call the OCPD.
OCPD is the officer in charge of the police district.
Yeah.
The chief police
personnel. The chief police, the officer in charge. He's the chief of the police district. And he came. They waited for him. And he came. He came and he said to me, please. He still called me YB. And he said, please, YB, you cannot go in. I said, why not? I said, why not? And then he said, this is police area, restricted area, you can't. Then I can have a CCTV recording then. I want to see what has been happening for the past 5 days. I want to see a recording.
So you wanted to see a recording of the CCTV which was installed there?
Yeah,
Yes.
on the cell.
On
I
the
want to
cell.
see my ballot box.
Yes.
Of course, he did not entertain me, and he said, no, YB, you can't enter. And I said, I have every right to enter. It's the ballot box is about my votes. I have every right to escort the EC officers going in. At that point, he shouted at me, he said, no, you're not going in. Listen to me, you're not going in. And I said, no, I'm going in. And I walked with the EC officer to the door, and that's when they held me with the rifle, and they stopped me. In fact, they even shouted all my officers.
Just a second. They what? Held you with the rifle? What did they do?
They stopped me at the door with a rifle, with an officer with a rifle. I don't remember how many officers there were, but I remember rifles lah. So even they chased all my officers back, back off. No pictures, no recording.
So, okay, slowly, because this is very important, no? So, you wanted to enter with the EC officers, then several police personnel with arms, arms meaning rifles, they then stopped you. What did they do? They stood in front of you or side of you? What did they do? Exactly.
They blocked the door.
They blocked the door.
They blocked the door, and they let the officers in, and they blocked the door. They won't let me in.
So they let the officers in, and they prevented you, blocked you.
They blocked me.
The arms, yes.
They blocked me, and the OCPD shouted at me, which he apologized later. But it doesn't make any difference. He did shout at me.
Yes, then?
And they blocked me from entering. And I don't see any reason why they should block me. So that's what happened, and I did a press statement immediately after that, and I was blocked. And they tried. If I had not stopped myself, they would have used force against me. And even all my team was frightened off. Some of the ladies were really shaking, and they were so afraid. But I stood firm at that. But the point is, I didn't get to go in. And they opened the cell without me being witness. And then they came out. Minutes later, I can't remember how long. But that's it. And this is contrary to what is promised to us. I mean, there is a security breach on the ballot boxes for advance voting. If it happens in my constituency, it can happen to all the other constituencies where advance voting took place. And if there's a considerable number of advance voters, it will make a difference. And even when we look at the report or the results of the advance voting, we hardly get 5 to 10%. Whereas I knew I had better results last election with advance voting. There were postal votes at that time. Even when I entered the polling station on the advance voting day, they put thumbs up to me like that, or they send me a message, a text message after that, YB, we voted for you, those sort of messages. I definitely received more than what's on the results. So it was a breach of what was promised to us when we wanted to change postal vote to advance vote. Initially, it was postal voting. With postal voting, there was no way we can, because there is no transparency, because you have to sign a form, you say this is your vote, and they get intimidated by that kind of procedure. So when we ask for advance voting, the reason is to give them a free and fair chance to vote for the candidate that they chooses. And this contradicts the purpose of advance voting. And we can see that even the spouse of the spouse of the is the police, is it? That do advance voting as well. So I was lucky because my margin was big, so it absorbed all the whatever they did to my advanced voters box, whatever, even if it was tampered with or even if it was changed, my margin was big enough to absorb. But if the margin is small, it would have changed the outcome of the elections.
What was your margin of victory?
About 4,000 plus.
Okay.
I mean the final majority.
Could you tell me how the box or whatever is sealed and whether there's a signature before you put the box into the security, the lockup, so that there is no way it can be cut or broken into without your signature being, spoiled and therefore seen to be tampered with? Or is there nothing like that?
The signature was there. I mean, it was sealed together. But signature, there was no way we could check that this is the signature, because the person that was the last polling agent was not the counting agent, you see. It was 5 days later. The person who was there for the counting, on the actual day of counting, is not the same person that was there that signed on the ballot box.
Or you yourself did not sign it?
No, I didn't. Because the person who, the last person who is the polling agent, is the person responsible to check that they are put in the box. The boxes are put in bags, and then all the serial numbers were put down.
Yeah. Because there was no way you can think of security for 24 hours, so there has to be some other mechanism to ensure that the boxes are not tampered with. I just wondered,
In one case, I have to share this with you. In one case, it was brought to my attention in Tambun, Parliament of Tambun. The polling agent were allowed to escort the boxes to the cells, but then they have to leave. They have to leave the cell for something, and then they were chased out of the cell for Friday prayer. I remember that. And then, but somebody outside the police station was monitoring, and they saw the ballot boxes being taken out. They followed, but then it was like a chase. But I cannot testify for them, but this is what I gathered. Yeah, we asked for CCTV. I think that's the best way. If they had not allowed us into police station with the argument that it is restricted area, then they could at least have provided us with recording of the CCTV of the ballot boxes, so that we can be sure that the ballot boxes are safe. But then they told me conveniently that all the CCTVs are not working.
May I just get it right? When the boxes were deposited in the cell, were your agents allowed to go in?
No.
When what happens then when it's ready to be counted? It's counted in the cell or it's taken out?
It's taken out.
When it's taken out, were your representatives
No.
there to escort it?
We were not informed what time they were going to take out. We were not informed what time they were going to open it.
Do you know if the other candidates' representatives were there to escort it?
You mean for other constituencies?
No, for the opposition,
No,
the Barisan.
Oh,
If you are not aware, then you can say.
I mean, were
No.
they only applying this principle on you, or were they applying the same principle on the other candidate and his agents?
I don't think it is an issue with them.
Were they there? The party,
There meaning
your other contestant, your other
my opponent.
opponent.
There meaning where?
With you at the police station
No.
trying to accompany the,
No,
or they weren't there?
no, because the tip-off I received is that the ballot boxes were going to be exchanged in favor of them. But anyway, they were not there.
Okay, and did you said the election commission officer was there, right? To go in to look at the box or whatever it was? What did he say when the police were trying to stop you or stopping you? What did he say?
He didn't
What
say
did-
anything. He didn't say anything.
He didn't say, please let her in because she's a
No.
candidate and
No, he
No?
didn't say. I don't think he have any authority.
No, but he didn't say anything.
He didn't
Never
say
have
anything.
authority,
He
yeah.
didn't say anything. In fact, when I stopped him initially, he waited. He was
But that-
compliant.
but he didn't do anything positive to help you get past the police.
No, the police were getting very aggressive at that time, and they ushered this officer in, while at the same time stopping me.
He didn't refuse to go in without you.
No.
That was what he could do, right?
Well,
And
I
say,
cannot.
well,
an-
if
I cannot
go
answer
in-
for them.
I know, but we want to establish
Yes.
whether the election commission officers are helpful or not.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
Okay, that's right. So if they, as I understand it, if they will not let you in as an election commission officer, I would say, no, I won't go in as well.
Yes.
And we'll go to another higher body to say, look, this is not right. Isn't that what it should happen?
I expect the election commission officers to live up to the promise of the chairperson.
But he didn't this time, right?
No, he didn't.
This is the same person you got the promise from?
Of course not. The promise was from the chairperson of the election commission, the number one person in the election commission, who should be responsible for all of the election officers all over the country. He has the authority to instruct.
So, what should have happened was that he should say, look, we're not going to go in, we're going to see the top guy who gave you that assurance, and then instruct the police, right?
What should have happened is that he should have instructed in the first place when on the 30th of April for the ballot boxes to be allowed to be guarded at 24 hours, and for our polling agents to have a view of the
No.
ballot box.
You see, what happens is this. The top guy says you can. But down the line, the guy down below there says you can't. Okay? You don't know whether the message has been, don't let her do it. Don't
No,
let
the
her do
problem
it,
with
right?
us, sir, the problem with the election commission in this country, sir, is that it is not the apex of the organization. The election commission does not have authority over the police. The election commission does not have authority over the MACC. If we have any report about vote vying, then it is not election commission that can take charge. It's the MACC.
But we are talking about the
Ballot box.
ballot box, which is the function of the EC.
Yes, yes. Well, but then the EC can actually instruct the police officers to allow us in. Also, likewise, not only his officers, but also the police, if the election commission had been the apex of the organization, as should be in elections, during elections.
Council, I think in the course of these days, there are some things we have established, isn't it?
Yes.
And that is, in most cases, it is in the police station.
Yes.
Now, whether that's the right place or not, it's a place deemed safe,
Yes.
all right? The question about whether there's 24-hour surveillance is not clear to us, and knowing the environment there, in a cell, you will have to have your personnel sleeping in the cell to watch that boxes for 24 hours.
We do have.
Yeah, never mind. But this, what we are trying is to establish what is the rule.
Yes.
And now the question would be, your request, and in your mind, you are saying that there must be a 24-hour surveillance on our part for the ballot boxes of advance voting.
Not only that, not only that.
No, but
That-
that's one of that.
That's one of
Yes.
it. That's one of it.
Yes.
But when there was a security breach, when the cell was opened 1 day prior to polling day to take out the indelible ink as well as the ballot papers, there was a breach of security, meaning that anything can happen. Someone could have sneaked in and changed the ballot boxes. We don't know. So then it is questionable about the safety of the ballot boxes. Why will I mean, you can answer about the, if the police say, you know, please trust the police, cells are supposed to be
Locked,
locked under lockup. But then I said to the police, people die in cells. People die in cells. So how do I know my ballot box is safe, even if people can die in cells? That's what I told the OCPD. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that when the cell was opened, there was no witness.
Yeah, but we were informed by somebody who seemed to know the rules and regulations that it could be in the lockup, although it doesn't have to be in the police station. It must be with the presiding officer. Or the,
Yes,
am I
returning
right?
officer. Yes, returning
Now,
officer.
that means the representatives should also be sleeping in that place where the officer has it if you want a 24-hour surveillance.
Yes.
Is there such a rule?
There's no such rule. Yes. But the important thing is because the ballot box is that sacred thing, you see, if you can call it that, and that is what requires. And we heard evidence of the fact that 5 days, you keep it for 5 days, where there is no control, and this witness has even suggested, what about CCTV? At least that keeps 24 hours rolling.
They can fabricate a CCTV.
Yes, that too.
And also when it was opened, that is also an issue, when it
Yes.
was opened and we were not allowed
And of
to
course,
observe.
Sorry, when the officer then came out again, after he had went in alone without you, and you were out there, did he come out with the boxes?
He came out with the boxes, but of course I didn't check the boxes because they came out, they were actually escorted. They will not allow me near those the EC officers.
But weren't the boxes opened when they took it to the place for where the votes were counted?
Sorry?
Wasn't the box opened up when where the voting of all the boxes were being
The boxes
counted?
were brought to the counting center.
And it was sealed then, or no?
Yeah, it was sealed,
Yes,
but we don't know whether it's the same box.
yes.
and maybe it's opportune time to say that we also have a report which actually was prepared by Inje Ibrahim Sofian, who was a witness here, and that shows very clearly the impact of early and postal vote. And he's got the, I'll make this available to the panel, and it shows the parliamentary seats, 30 parliamentary seats where the margin, it was marginal, and it was early and postal votes that made the difference in respect of 30 seats. And if these 30 seats had gone the other way, then it was, you know, this government of the day is on the basis of 133 for the Barisan and 89. Speculating, if these 30 seats had changed hands, then the Barisan will get 103 and Pakatan Rakyat will get 119. It changes the whole complexion of government. And the point we are making, that's why we have labored this point at length, is that the custody of this, the 5-day custody of this advanced voting has become extremely critical to even determining the government of the day, and that is why. And we have not been able, of course, to get complete information, but this kind of sporadic information that we have got over the whole range of witnesses over the last 4 days suggests again that there is some anxiety that requires some serious recommendations with regard to advanced voting. That is the point. And then we had Dr. To, who was in the government. It's quite brave of him to come and talk about his former practice, because he was himself a beneficiary, as Your Honor made quite clear, of all these improprieties. But it did suggest that the police itself is in the service of the government, and in particular the political party which was contesting this election. So when we talk about these boxes being in the custody of the police, we have to look at it in the context of the fact that the police is not that independent guardian of the public interest. That is the point. But just to conclude, I think you wanted to give us an information with regard to one more issue, is it?
Yes.
Maybe very briefly, because, you know, we had, oh, it's already 8 o'clock, so.
Yes, thank you, Council. Very briefly, I would like to explain about one of my voters who was given the ballot paper twice. I'm sure you have heard of this case before. He is actually my voter, a voter in my constituency. He went to vote at 10:30 a.m. He went back, and then he discovered that the ink could be washed off. So just to try the system, he went again at 1:30. He was given another ballot paper. Same stream, same school, same class. He did not cast the vote. He went out and then showed the ballot paper to the police that was taking charge of the door, you know, at the exit. And they took his ballot paper away. He then went to do a police report. Okay, and I would like to bring to your attention about another guideline that was issued by the Election Commission, which was never explained. It was never gazetted, or it was never discussed with any of the political parties. It was just given to the agents a few days prior to elections. And I was not aware of this guideline until after the elections. But having studied that, I am now clear that this is the guideline that allow for the person to receive the ballot paper twice. What happened was, these guidelines say, I'm sorry I didn't bring the guideline, but I'm able to bring to provide it later because I just landed in KLIA. What is being said in the guideline is that should there be a congestion, the guideline is tata cara mengendali kesesakan di saluran. It's guideline on how to address the congestion at the streams. So the guideline says if there's more than 20 people lining up, you can actually open another line, another stream within the stream, and there is an envelope which you can open with a fresh electoral roll. So this is exactly what happened at 1 p.m. So the clerks were called, yeah, and then there were two persons calling the names. One with the roll that was used from the morning, and the other one with the roll that is used in the afternoon when they open up the envelope with the fresh roll. So that's exactly what happened. That's how he got his ballot paper, because his name was not marked and he was called using the second roll. So this guideline actually facilitate for that to happen. And this guideline was not even briefed to any of the political parties. It was not even made known. It was just like given like that. And in our, we were so busy during the elections, we didn't even realize that it was there until later, much later, when I got it. So my point, if it can happen to a person, it can happen to many other people, many other voters. Intentionally, in this case, it's unintentionally. It can happen intentionally too. So this is
Any police report made about this?
This voter made a police report. I'm trying to arrange for him to testify tomorrow. This voter actually made a police report, but instead of investigating, EC made a comment that he can be arrested. So he was just, I think he's just being a good citizen. He didn't cast his vote. He just went out and showed that he received a second ballot paper. He should have kept it, but the police took it away from him.
Well, he should be arrested and charged, and then we'll have the whole story out.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, then
So
the whole
what
story
were
will
the
come out.
polling agents doing?
Okay, the polling agents, I spoke to the polling agents later, they were confused. They were confused. Mark already. But then it was happening so fast. It was happening so fast because two people calling out names and then another name, two at a time. So they were confused. But later when she showed me the electoral roll, she showed me there were 2 marks with different pen. The polling agent in the morning had different colored pen, the polling agent in the afternoon had different colored pen, so it's 2 marks. But at that time she said she was like so confused. She wasn't sure. She thought the agent in the morning had made a mistake or something like that.
So, yes, if there are no more questions, then YB Fuzia, we thank you very much for taking the time to be with us, the people. When you all are people's representative, we had very few and far in between people's representative coming here is a point of lament. Maybe at another time when there's a people's tribunal, the people's representative will be in bigger numbers. But in any event, we thank you very much for at least taking the time to enhance the comprehensive nature of the inquiry, and your testimony has been extremely useful.
Thank
and
you.
Perhaps you can communicate to your other colleagues who are also people's representative about what the people are doing, in
Thank
whose
you.
name they are members of parliament.
Thank you,
very
Council.
much.
Thank you, panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. To be honest, I think it's been a long day, and I admire the fact that there has been a very sustained interest by the members of the panel, which has also given us considerable inspiration to continue with this process. So perhaps we can, I think maybe it's time to call it a day. And we want to thank you, and perhaps we'll start tomorrow morning for the final day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All rise. The People's Tribunal is now adjourned and will resume tomorrow.